Great. Happy Friday, all. Very warm welcome to the A4S International Case Competition 2024 information session, Adopting Business Models to Support Human Rights for All. So my name is Olga Yadinskaya. I'm an education manager at A4S, and I'm responsible for ongoing development and delivery of A4S International Case Competition, as well as growth of partnerships and wider business school engagement. So in today's session, we'll be running through the following. So first and foremost, I'm going to tell you a bit about who we are, who is A4S, followed by a case focus, most important bit. And we're going to have an interview with Tim Deacon, CFO at Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, talking about logistics as well as a very important bit, it's competition timeline, and we're going to finish off with Q&As. So please do use the chat function, sorry, not Q&A function, and put your questions as we speak, but hopefully we're going to answer majority of them. So firstly, what is A4S? So the key aim is to transform finance to make sustainable business as usual. Accounting for Sustainability, so A4S, was established by His Majesty King Charles in 2004 when he was Prince of Wales, to help ensure that we are not battling to meet 21st century challenges with, at best, 20th century decision-making and reporting systems. So at A4S, we work with finance and accounting community to do three things. So first and foremost, inspire finance leaders to adopt sustainable and resilient business models, as well as transform financial decision-making to reflect the opportunities and risks posed by the climate crisis and other environmental and social issues. And finally, scale up action to transition to sustainable economy. So what is A4S International Case Competition? It's a great and unique opportunity for you students across the globe to help shape a future where sustainable business is business as usual. This is a chance for your ideas to be seen and heard by leaders of some of the world's largest and most influential companies. So with different focus every year, competition attracts a diverse group of business and accounting students, business leaders of the future, and harness their drive and creativity to help today's business executives solve some of the world's greatest challenges. So we invite you with creative and critical mindsets as action-oriented and resilient problem solvers to come together and design the next generation of sustainable business models. So this year is 7th year of international case competition, and in 2023 we challenged students to identify ways of scale up nature-based solutions in an impactful and resilient way. Team Greenify from Nanyang Business School, Singapore, won their nature-based green wall solution to reduce the energy needed to cool our cities from the urban heat island effect. Their solution used an innovative financing model attractive to real estate owners. So as you can see, we list first and second places on this slide, and first place winners will receive 10,000 Canadian dollars, while second place will receive 5,000 Canadian dollars. There's also People's Choice Award, which is an online vote, which is chosen by the public. So why to get involved? So beyond the cash prize, which I just mentioned, it's a great opportunity for you to connect with industry leaders, potential future employers, as well as connect with students across the world. Feel empowered and encouraged by developing viable solutions with consultative support from our mentors, as well as develop much needed solutions for sustainable economy based on real world data and insights. Of course, learn practical applications of business solutions, have your voice heard in critical discussions around sustainable business development, and inspire others and be inspired by a diverse range of perspectives, problems, and solutions. So this year, International Case Competition is challenging students to examine potential impacts on human rights, incorporate business models and strategies, and to develop innovative business practices, approaches, and solutions where profits and commitment and action on human rights go hand in hand. So the teams are asked to select one of 127 of world's most influential companies assessed by World Benchmarking Alliance in the 2022 Corporate Human Rights Benchmark, and do two things. So first and foremost, examine connections between the features of their business model. So thinking about value proposition, value chain, cost structure, revenue model, and potential impacts on people, human rights. And based on that, develop innovative business practices, approaches, and/or solutions for company to adopt their business model and to address these potential impacts. So, so hopefully we whetted your appetite, and now I will be joined by Susan White, who will interview our guest, Tim Deacon. They will discuss human rights and sustainable business, as well as share tips on entering the competition, which is really important. So Susan White is the director of our CFO program at Accounting for Sustainability, A4S, and Tim Deacon is Chief Financial Officer at Ontario's Teachers Pension Plan, where he leads the global finance team. He's responsible for Ontario's teachers' financial and management reporting, taxation, valuation, risks analytics, and model valuations. Tim joined Ontario's teachers in 2021 and has more than 20 years of senior management experience in financial management and global investments. He's a judge for the competition, and also he's a member of Canadian chapter for A4S. So on to you, Susan.
Thank you, Tim, for once again for your time and for your support of the A4S International Case Competition. And as Olga has outlined, this year's case focuses on human rights, which is obviously a very complex issue for organizations. So just to open, what do you think it means to be a sustainable business, and why do you think a focus on human rights is an important part of this?
Great. Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you, Olga, for the introduction and for including me in this session. A big welcome to everyone joining in. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are. And it's really always a pleasure to be part of any of these types of conversations. And I couldn't agree with you more. Human rights is a really big topic and a really critical one. And, thinking about what a sustainable business is and focusing human rights on that is a really challenging topic, but a really important one to unpack. And I guess starting for me, what a sustainable business is one that really has a focus on environmental and social impacts in its strategy and how it executes on that strategy, quite simply. I think businesses that are authentic about being sustainable demonstrate outcomes that really seek to reduce the negative environmental impact that they have and positively impact society. So ultimately not just concerned with profit taking, but also how they're organizing themselves sustainably. And I guess, for me personally, to be sustainable is to endure, to survive. And a term that we say in accounting is to be able to continue as a going concern. You can't be a going concern if you're not sustainable. And so as it relates to human rights, most businesses require humans either to develop their products or services, or they require humans to consume or purchase those goods or services. So it's something that you cannot ignore as a business. And certainly if you're going to be one that endures or survives or is a going concern and therefore sustainable. And I think for some industries, this is more acute than others, particularly if you have a labor force or if you are selling goods or products. So those that have large labor forces, such as manufacturing, and or if you have a dependency on the local environment in which you're operating, so things like extractive industries have a really particular focus around the need and importance of human rights. And so as I was thinking about this case competition and what are the components of that, given it's such a broad topic, some of the human rights that come to mind are things like child and forced labor, land rights, women's rights, living wages, especially in a highly inflationary environment. These are some of the examples that come to mind. And I think businesses really need to get these things right, especially today in our society and how global and how transparent things are. Because if they don't, we see time and time again examples where they faced backlash, either from customers, their brand or their reputational risk is impaired in instances where there are regulations involved, they're subject to regulatory fines or sanctions, and that really all could risk the ability for that organization or that business to be sustainable or to survive. But those that do get it right prosper and have engaged workforces. They have higher employee engagement, ability to attract and retain talent if they're focused on human rights, and ultimately have more of an enduring revenue stream. I guess it's a big question, as we said at the beginning, Susan. One of the things that comes to mind for me at Ontario Teachers, just for context, this is really foundational for us. We are a pension plan. We represent about 333 or so thousand active and retired teachers in the province of Ontario here in Canada. And we have a really active, engaged membership base. We have two sponsors for our plan, the provincial government in Ontario, as well as the Teachers Federation themselves. And our teachers care about a lot of things, but as it relates to their pension plan, it's really two things. It's one, are they going to have a secure retirement? I.e., is our pension plan fully funded, which we're in a fortunate situation to be in. We've been fully funded for the last 10 years. But then the next thing that they care most about is how we invest. And they care, our teachers in particular care deeply about human rights, and in particular labor rights. In the public teaching profession here in Canada or in Ontario is a unionized workforce, so they're very interested in terms of labor requirements. And then also they are very keen and important in the countries, in the markets that we invest in, and whether their own perception of the human rights of those countries and in those operating environments. So just to give you context to that, at our last annual general meeting, we had a large draw out from our teaching membership base. And, loosely, I would say about a third of those questions that we got at that annual general meeting were human rights related, in particular around labor and or the countries that we're investing in. About a third of the questions that we got were around climate. So also about the impact that we're making as a pension plan in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then I would say the remaining third were broad and other topics. So not only is human rights important for businesses for some of the reasons that I've described, and it's linked to sustainability, it's also critically important to us as an entity in our organization.
Great, thanks very much, Tim. And it's really interesting to, you touched on all the different, kind of facets of human rights, and really hopefully that'll get people's thoughts whirring about where they might be able to focus their project work, and also the different impacts depending on the type of business that you're in. Can you share your perspective on the impact of human rights on your business models, and how upholding those human rights creates value? I know you've touched on it a little bit already.
Yeah, sure. Maybe just to elaborate a bit more on that. I mean, I think it's extremely timely that A4S has chosen this topic as the case competition for this year. I think one only needs to look around about what's been happening on human rights. I mean, it's always been prevalent. That's why the United Nations came up with the principles that they did, and we have benchmarking studies, which we'll probably touch on later. But more recently, I think COVID really helped put a focus on human rights, particularly around mental health, and that was happening during the COVID time periods and the global lockdowns, but equally on health in general, and in terms of rights and focus on human health. I think the heightened geopolitical environment that we're in, the global decoupling that we've seen across nations globally, and then more recently, critically around wars and really putting rights and freedoms or lack thereof front and center for all of us. So I really it couldn't be more top of mind or center. It's probably one of the most pressing issues we face, and certainly at this very, very moment. So how does upholding human rights really create value? That's a great and again broad question. I think really the focus of this case competition. But I guess for me, taking an active role in sustainability in general and an active role in a business is critical. And I think human rights is really a component of that. As you said, I touched on some of the themes earlier, but I was sort of trying to frame how I would be thinking about this, and how we as a pension plan, when we go to invest, think about this. And I feel it's in a couple broad categories. The first off is around governance. I'll use that term broadly, but human rights creates value through governance. So first of all is actually acknowledging the importance of human rights. So you can do that through disclosures and what your strategy is, and I'll touch on that in a moment, but really assigning responsibility within a company for human rights to both board and management, and how they embed that into their organization creates value. And I'll touch on that in a second. And really through that is driving and incentivizing action. So the first is get your governance right, to have proper oversight, set a strategy, and be clear on what your position is on human rights. And then where you create the value is really through that driving and incentivizing action. So I see that in two parts as well, through measurement. So what is your goal or objective there? And then through accountability, through disclosures and internal frameworks for measuring those outcomes. And so just to give an example for Ontario teachers, how we've used these components to create value within the portfolio companies that which we invest, in particular around human rights. So as an investor, we have about 250 billion of assets under management in Canadian dollars. And that's a globally diversified portfolio. About over half of that is in private companies, and over 80% of that we manage in-house. So within those private companies, we're increasingly taking more active controlling ownership stakes so that we can drive and influence the outcomes. And that's purely been a factor because we've seen by taking an active role on governance, through voting, through shaping strategies and objectives, that we get a better return profile. So you can focus on things like human rights and get a higher return. They're not mutually exclusive. And so getting that governance right is really important to driving that value. And then when I think about some of the examples of that, and I think the case itself touches on that, that value comes through what is the value proposition of the organization, what's its value chain, what's its cost structure, and what's its revenue model. Those are, another way to break this down. Back to that enduring company being a going concern, those that have large labor forces, if you're focused on human rights and providing health and well-being for your employees, having a health and safety component to that, having appropriate pay that is competitive and offering broader benefits, that may actually increase your cost structure in some cases, but you're going to get an opportunity to drive higher revenue and more engagement in the workforce, because you have an organization that is really highly engaged and compensated appropriately. So that kind of gets at forced labor issues or underpaying situations that you won't be able to retain those people in the long term, and may not drive a revenue model if you're subject to exposure or brand or reputational risk, right? If as that becomes knowledge or public. So driving that through engagement, through governance is important. And then the measurement piece is really important to enhancing that accountability. And, I referenced earlier that the corporate human rights benchmark study that's put out by the World Benchmarking Alliance, really, I think it started about 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and it started to track how companies are performing against these dimensions. And it's really interesting to see from when it was first launched to the most recent publication that's available right now was from last year around November. So hopefully we'll get an updated one for this November for 2023 results. But you can already start to see the progress that measuring these things and making it public and available, and showcasing what companies are doing well at this and which ones are still struggling really helps to evidence that value creation.
Yeah, definitely. That transparency works really well. So a lot of strategic decisions to be made. What do you believe that the finance teams could be doing to support them well-being and development and respect for human rights?
Yeah, this is something that's close to me, obviously, given the role that I have been given to help with the finance function here at Ontario Teachers. I think, first of all, I think the role of finance in any organization brings a great lens to the organization, because it's often looks across the enterprise, right? It's not necessarily just siloed within a particular area of the company. It has accountability, certainly on financial reporting, which is pretty core to finance across the whole enterprise. So first off, I often look at how to continually modernize the finance function to transition from being an operator or a steward type role, which is critically important, but increasingly become more of an activist and a strategist. And I say activist because the platform that finance has, being an enterprise-wide, can really drive and influence outcomes. So the first thing finance can do is really help agitate in the organization. Is there a clear strategy as it relates to human rights? Is that clear? Is it authentic? Is it credible? And finance has a position often to being a second line of defense, or because of that stewardship governance role, it comes from a place of authenticity and credibility, usually from the beginning. So I think that, first of all, finance can play a role to help making sure that the organization is focused on that in general. I think it's further enhanced because finance is often in the measurement and reporting business. And so ensuring there is a way of measuring how good the company is doing on its human rights areas and focus. That could be in terms of its compensation frameworks, its health and safety, its benefits, its community impact, how it's giving back, for example. And then on the reporting side, really taking advantage of the increased focus around disclosures around sustainability topics and impact more broadly, including human rights. So whether that's the S1 standard that's been recently released by the ISSB or the CSRD in Europe, there are all these various reporting frameworks that finance can play a role in helping contribute to those disclosures and making sure it's authentic and credible in terms of how the company is positioning itself. So there's many ways that a finance function can and needs to play to be able to make this happen.
I love that idea that they're an active function rather than reactive. So that's great. And Ontario Teacher Pension Plan and you, Tim, have been involved in this competition for a number of years, both as sponsors and as judges. Can you share just some final comments on why you're involved in this competition and what you will be looking for this year as a member of the judging panel?
Sure. This is my third year, I believe, with the competition. Yes. And, I continually am so impressed and inspired by the creativity, the passion, the insights from all of the submissions that come through this case competition. So, I continue to love to be involved in this because it's frankly, it's infectious. It's just so positive in the sense of motivating and inspiring those thoughts. And frankly, it helps me remind me the importance of the topics at the case competitions. And Olga gave some of a preview of some of the past winners and what those focuses are, and in particular human rights, as I said, because it's so timely. So I feel it's an honor and a privilege to be involved in this, and always look forward to hearing the ideas. I think for me, overall, what I really look for is creativity. I look for whether the true solution. There's no shortage of problems or issues in a topic like human rights, like we've been covering in this session. But focusing on a solution to that is what we all need to continue to be able to make improvements here. With that solution, also look for practicality. Sometimes it's very easy to come up with some really big creative ideas, but really hard to implement, and so therefore may limit the ability to actually make that impact. So having some practicality to that. And then when it comes to the presentation itself, both the written/video sort of submission and certainly the live panel sessions, it's really around the energy and enthusiasm and passion that you show. That as I said, that's where that infectious motivation, inspirational piece comes from. And then, Susan, I'm not sure if the teams have received the rubric, but we could probably share some highlights of the specific components to that, if that would be helpful at this stage.
Great. Maybe Olga can answer that question in her next section. But thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and definitely what OTTP are doing. I'm going to hand back to Olga now, who's going to give a bit more detail on how to enter the competition.
Great. Thank you very much, both. That was really great and insightful. And yes, Tim, I'm going to speak about the criteria, the rubric for sure. It's a very important part. So let's move on to logistics, timeline, competition timeline. So here you can see some key dates to be mindful of. So the entry window will open on the 6th of November and will close on Sunday, 14th of January, 2024. The virtual semifinals will take place the week commencing 5th of February for over 4 days. And with in-person networking event for all semifinalists and finalists on Friday, 22nd of March, and in-person final on Saturday, 23rd of March, 2024 at Rotman School of Management in Toronto. Also, semifinalist and finalist teams will get the mentoring as well. So this year, we're inviting anyone interested to start thinking about the content of your submission early. As we highlighted before, we encourage you to select and focus as soon as possible. One of the companies selected of 127 world's influential companies assessed by World Benchmarking Alliance. And please do notify us as soon as possible via the registration form. You can find the link in the chat. The team should share it with you, and it will really help us approach your selected company and invite them to support you with your submission. So it's a really great opportunity for you to network, learn, and meet your potential future employers. We also strongly encourage for you to review our proposed references and resources, which will support to build your proposal. This can be found in the competition entry guide. Again, the team will share it in the chat. So please take a note of that. Your entry will benefit from you familiarizing yourself with the content early in your development phase. And also, please do go on our YouTube channel to view previous entrance videos to help inform the development of yours. So again, the link is in the chat. So do please check those links out. So the entries must be submitted as teams of up to 3 to 5 people, and this can include a mixed range of students of different institutions. So you don't have to come from one. We accept both graduate and undergraduate students, and your submissions is due by Sunday, 14th of January, 2024, 11:59 p.m. EST, and should contain the following documents. So executive summary consisting of 2 pages, so title page, team outline, proposal summary, followed by 5-minute video pitch. So please do use your pitch to complement your executive summary and convey any other facts, concepts, arguments, and models that did not fit into the executive summary. A supporting financial model, which is a financial breakdown in Excel format, and finally a consent for the video pitch, as all the videos will be uploaded on A4S YouTube channel. So here's the very important slide which Tim referenced before as well. So please do make a note of the judging criteria, which can be found in the competition entry guide, as these are the criteria which you will be judged upon. So please do make sure you touch on all of them in your entry. So please make a note. And again, don't worry, I'm taking a note now. It's going to be in the competition entry guide. So moving on to semifinals. So we will require teams to present the following. So 10-minute live virtual presentation. So you'll be able to pitch an improved version of the business idea to judges using the feedback from the assessment phase and from the mentoring, which we mentioned earlier, which you're going to receive. And we're going to kind of finish your entry with Q&A session. We're going to have an opportunity to engage in direct conversation with judges to provide more context and defend your business proposal. So the finals, so kind of going to be similar format, however, it's going to be live presentation, and it will be a little bit more detailed, again, supported by the mentors, and we'll finish with Q&A sessions, so similar to semifinals, but a little bit more brief. So key things to remember. Please do plan well ahead. Note that the deadline is early in the new year, so January, 14th of January. And please plan around your exams, key assignments, deadlines, holidays. Decide when you're going to meet with the team, when you're going to not meet with your team. Ensure to select one of the organizations listed in 127 world's most influential companies, and notify us as early as possible via online registration form. again, which was shared in the chat. And this will allow us to contact your selected company in good time and invite them to support your entry. Also agree how you will work together, for how long you will discuss ideas, how will you split the research, when will you start solutioning, kind of who will be doing what, just the roles and responsibilities within your team, who will write an executive summary and when you're going to do your video, when you're going to edit it. So group the various tasks into work streams and agree who does what, as I just said. So storyboard your video pitch to complement the written components. So the video pitch presents the opportunity for you to show a little bit of yourself, your personality, so you convince the audience of validity and strength of your solution. So remember, the video should complement your written components, and it's a chance for you to present compelling case for your proposed solution. It should not introduce any new ideas or models. Please instead use the video to elaborate or explain any further details, facts, arguments that you were not able to fully lay out in your executive summary. And finally, use the competition guide, which again, it was shared in the chat, and we'll follow up as well with you via the emails. All relevant information on the case competition with guidance on how to develop your proposal, helpful tips on how to shoot a great video is available in that guide. And again, it's on our website in the chat, and we're going to follow up with you. So now, just to kind of finish off the competition outline, we would like to share some advice from our last year's finalists and winners to yourselves as future applicants of international case competition.
My future advice for the future applicants will be to go into this project with an open mind, be open to working with teammates with different opinions, and also be able to compromise. And it's best to also do a lot of research on the project that you are looking at, because it's very important to have your project that is backed by very strong evidence.
And this is really an opportunity where you can look beyond what we are saying and explore different products, what different countries are doing, what the startups are doing. So I think that was that discovery, like looking for that kind of product, which is actually scalable and also sustainable at the same time, was a great experience for me. And I encourage the new aspiring participants or new teams to really do the homework, do the research, because that's not only knowledgeable, but also was very fun and enjoyable for us.
Spend the time to really research, because you would see a lot of interesting and optimistic ideas. The climate challenge is immense, and so once you do the research and see what the possible solutions can be, spend the time to actually build it up, because you never know what those skills and that information and that experience will lead to in the future, and how it can be transformative.
Right. Great. So now we will take this time to open the floor for Q&A session, which will be moderated by Susan and answered by our guest, Tim Deacon, and Helen Slinger, who is Executive Director of Knowledge and Learning at A4S. So on to you, Susan. I will help as well to answer.
No worries. Thanks, Olga. So if anybody has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A. There is no question too small or no question that's wrong. So please pop it in the Q&A. While we're waiting for people to pop those in, there is one question that came through our email information box in advance, which was just to Tim and Helen, who are both judges. What are the common mistakes that you've seen during finals that you would give advice on to any future entries? I might hand that to Tim first.
Common mistakes in the final. I don't know that there are a lot of mistakes, I would say. I mean, it's by the time you get to the finals, you've gotten through many rounds, both within your own school and with your team, with the debating. So don't often see what I would characterize as a mistake. I guess a couple thoughts maybe is be consistent. Sometimes I've had in the submissions, you know, a lot of late changes between their sort of final submission and then what their live presentation is. That can be confusing to the judges because we prepare our thoughts on the written submission and then you know, look to understand, you know, validate some of the questions or ideas we have. So if you are going to change something late in the game, be quite explicit about that and why you've done that. And so that maybe came up in one or two of scenarios over the last 3 years. Not so much a mistake; it just helps. It helps if that happens to bring the judges along for that. So in the absence of that, just being consistent throughout would be one. And then I think. Again, not a mistake, but maybe just there's something to be said too of over preparedness. So by the time you're at the finals, you've already passed all the big hurdles. So I encourage you to really have fun with it and just know that you've got a really great idea and there's something there. And what I've experienced in the last 3 years is that they're all phenomenal quality submissions by that point. So we have a very tough job as judges to try and differentiate between them. So I guess the mistake would be is just to be so uncomfortable about the situation. You've already earned it, I guess, in my mind. So have fun and don't let it be a mistake because it's a real opportunity and privilege for us as well to be hearing from you.
That's great advice, Tim. Helen, anything you'd like to add?
I think maybe not mistakes so much as traps that teams occasionally fall into. I'd say one is just really make sure you study the case focus and the question that we're asking, the challenge that we're setting, and making sure that you answer that. So it's a little bit like when you go into an exam and they say, answer the actual question, not the one that you know the answer to. You need to spend the time researching the company that you're focusing on and really truly understanding the question and then answering that question. And so that'd be one trap. I guess another trap is not working as a team, or particularly where that can actually sometimes be evident to the judges. So maybe there's one or two team members that come across as overly dominant and trying to answer questions that perhaps they're not the best placed in the team to answer. So really be careful in terms of how you divide up the different roles of your team and making sure that everybody knows the individual area of questions that they will respond to. And then you don't end up talking over each other or anything like that. And I guess finally, I think, not related to that, the third thing would be, not being prepared enough for the questions and answers. We have some very high level judges. Obviously, Tim is one of them. I'm one of the others. And we do have some good questions lined up for you. So make sure you think about that in advance, and not only who's going to answer the question, but what you're going to answer it with. And take the opportunity to practice that as well, either within your team or ask your friends or fellow students to sort of test you. And that's always good preparation as well.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to go to we've quite a few Q&A questions now. So just the first one, maybe Helen, do you need to take care about the regulatory feasibility of the proposal, or is it just the pure business financial aspects?
Yeah, so I think where Tim was coming from earlier, and he talked about the solution having to be practical. I think it's absolutely relevant that you need to think, about that regulatory space, but we don't want an answer that's focused on regulation. That's not what I'm saying. I think just making sure that you think broadly about, could there be some key regulatory traps here, and highlight that as a risk in your proposal and how you might propose to mitigate it. That's what I would suggest.
Great. Thank you. Olga, maybe you'll take the next one. Will the finalists receive financial support getting to Canada, so outside of Canada?
Sure. So we have allocated fund for the travel support. We'll send all the information and application forms once we're close for the entries, so 14th of January, but definitely we'll have some allocated. So we welcome applications from across the world.
Great, thank you. Somebody's asked here, could we share a sample of a pitch? Is this like our own business idea that we want to start? Or yeah, so I think we have, and correct me again if I'm wrong, Olga, that we have the pitches from previous years on the website. So please go on the website and you'll get a really good sense of what other teams have done in past competitions.
I think if I can maybe come back on the second half of that question
Yes.
as well, Susan. I think when you're watching previous years' videos back, some of the previous year's cases have been more focused at that startup area. But this year, we're asking you to select from the 127 companies that are on the corporate human rights benchmark. None of those are startup companies. They're all large, influential organizations from all over the world. So that's where you need to focus your entry, not on a new business idea that's a startup. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Helen. So for Tim and Helen, just what kind of questions should the participants expect at various stages? Well, I suppose the semi-final and the final. Maybe Tim, if you wouldn't mind taking that first.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think Helen was in her avoiding pitfalls, which I thought were all great advice. The preparedness. So I really like the theme about anticipating what questions you think judges might want to ask, and I think that really comes down to the judging rubric, the components that Olga walked through, which participants will have more details of in their packages. But to give you some examples, we'll likely want to poke at some of the assumptions that you've made, to understand the thought process, to understand maybe what some of the risks are, where you've had to have a hypothesis, for example. We'll want to poke at the feasibility piece to that, and have you thought through like implementation considerations, etc. So I think where we were usually coming from is to try and understand the rigor that you've gone through to come up with your proposal, and to try and anticipate where there may be challenges with the idea. And so the more upfront you are, both at not only anticipating the questions, but even in your submission, I always encourage people to put out risks or the unknowns or aspects of what you need to believe for this proposal to come through. The more upfront you are about that and proactive, you're going to make our job harder as judges for us to find something to ask, but it shows that you've got really good command about your idea and the opportunity, and its risks and what's involved, because that's really what we'll be focused on. I don't know, Helen, if you would have anything to add or different from what I shared.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that this year we've asked for a financial model to be submitted, which is a new requirement compared to previous years. And that's because we do intend on asking some financial focus questions as part of that judging. And so that's why that's in there, to allow us to see, I guess, greater detail about the assumptions that you've made in those financial models, and we can assess their reasonableness and ask you questions around them.
Great, thank you. I think the next question is around assumptions, a little bit digging deeper on that. So are we allowed to make assumptions, which I think we've covered that off, but considering the solution has to be practical, what kind of assumptions are usually looked down on? So what ones would you not find acceptable? Might be a bit of a challenging question to answer, Helen.
Yeah, and it really depends on what company you choose and what solution you're proposing. But I would say at a top level, so long as those assumptions are broadly reasonable, then that's okay. So long as you're not expecting a drastic change in the economy, or huge fluctuation on market share or anything like that, and that they are reasonable in the normal course of business, then they're acceptable.
Yeah, I think funding was one of the ones that came up previously, where you think you're going to get that funding, and is it a reasonable assumption where you believe that funding is going to come from?
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. And another question is, the focus, should it be on one particular human right, or can we solve to be solved, or can it be the company's overall impact?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah. If you could, Helen, and maybe Tim, you could add at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely fine to look at human rights collectively. And again, it depends on what you're proposing. It's also fine to home in on a particular area. It really is up to you. It's not restricted.
Yeah, it may help as you're thinking about that, starting with the company and then looking at that and if that triggers a human rights or collection of rights. But your solution, the ability for it to be practical and implementable, if it's too broad or too wide, it may impact its credibility. So that's usually probably the best guide. But yeah, not restricted, but if you throw the entire definition of human rights in it, you're just making it more challenging for yourself in on that.
Yeah. As we discussed, it's quite broad and quite complex. Yeah. Great. Any more questions? Okay, I don't know, just Helen or Tim, if you've any final comments, otherwise I'll hand back to Olga to wrap up.
I'd just like to echo Tim's earlier comment about, enjoying it, having fun. You do your best work when you're relaxed and when you're enjoying yourself. So, I mean, take the opportunity to enjoy this while you learn, and we look forward to seeing your solutions.
Yeah, well put, Helen. I mean, this is on your spare time, right? That you're devoting extra time over and above your studies and whether work or other personal commitments that you have. So having fun is key, but really lean into this, given how important this topic is and how prevalent it is right now. Hopefully you find that inspiring for yourselves too, in terms of the role that all of us can make a difference in this space. So we're really looking forward to the submissions. There is some financial incentive for you through all of this, but equally, whether you're the finalist and the winner or not, don't let that dissuade you from having those good ideas and using this case competition as the forum to really mobilize like-minded people who share that passion. And so can't wait for your submissions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you, Helen. And I'll hand back to Olga.
Great. Thank you so much as well for me. That was really interesting. I want to apply myself now. So thank you, Susan, Tim, Helen, what a great Q&As and interview. So I want to conclude with a big thank you for all of you, for all the audience. Thanks for coming and joining us. Again, just want a kind of final reminder that competition opens for submission on 6th of November, and in the meantime, please do register the selection of your businesses via the online form, which is in the chat, and we're gonna invite them to support the competition. And also you can find all the relevant information on our website. Also feel free to email us at A4SICC@a4s.org. So we really look forward to receiving your interest, and thank you very much and have a great Friday and a weekend.